So, um, so I offer to talk about the lessons of 50 years of Buddhist practice, and I'm not quite sure what I'm going to say. So part of the discovery for me, but I think it's one of the very kind of surprises for me now that I'm 72, is to that I review my life and I understand the past in new ways. And I understand my Buddhist practice in new ways, and I understand what happened to me in new ways, and whether it's more or less accurate, the new ways, but I feel enriched by it. I feel like, wow, that was a lot went on. I took a lot of things for granted. A lot of things I just kind of merrily went along and practiced and was changed by it, but didn't give it much thought. But now, after all these years, I'm kind of beginning to, it's kind of, it seems to be a natural thing to do, to review and to think about all those years. And so this will be a little bit a chance for me to do it publicly. Hopefully, it's interesting for you. And just it's kind of nice that right there, the beginning of all that was Santa Cruz. That there's a number of things at that beginning, first years, that had a big impact on me of coming through Santa Cruz. One was kind of before I really got involved in Buddhism in a serious way. In 1974, I had occasion a few times to hitchhike up from Santa Barbara to the Bay Area. And somehow, maybe because of the rides I got, I don't know if you know, any of you were hitchhikers back then, but there used to be like, a dozen people, on the same hitchhiking spot. And we try to position ourselves and before they run to the back or different places to hopefully we can get a ride. And it was like a crowded scene to hitchhike up and down the coast. And somehow I don't know how I ended up in Santa Cruz, but a few times then I was hitchhiking from just north of town, were places where there was a spectacular view of the ocean. And I was just so happy to stand there with my thumb out, hitchhiking and singing Janis Joplin's song. That freedom is nothing more than nothing left to lose, something like that. And I just was so happy. And one of the times I remember I got a ride too fast. I I just felt so free and so happy standing there with my thumb out and just singing the song and looking out at the ocean and but then I got a ride. But I'm saying this because that feeling of freedom, standing just north of town here, was a very important reference point for me as I started doing Buddhist practice. That somehow Buddhist practice involved something of that freedom. That was the kind of the reference point or the inspiration or what gave context for it. And so I ended up checking out San Francisco Zen Center. See, what happened there was I came up to San Francisco and I had to live in Berkeley in the fall of '74, trying to figure out what to do. I dropped out of college. And at Moe's bookstore, I came across this magazine from the farm in Tennessee. It was a largest American hippie commune, and so I had occasion to go through Tennessee. So I stopped for 3 days, and I stayed for a few months because I was so amazed by what I discovered there. And what I discovered was that when I got there, the Stephen Gaskin, who was the leader, and some of the other leaders were in the Tennessee jail, imprisoned for using LSD. They spent a year in jail. They came out when I was still there. But at some point, they realized at some point that it didn't really work LSD was their sacrament. That was their whole spiritual practice around LSD. And they had to figure out the different way because they realized that we can't do LSD in Tennessee, early 1970s. And so they found the next best thing, maybe better. And what they found that was alternative to LSD was honesty. And they were the most honest place I've ever seen in my life. And they would stop, if there was any tension between people, they would stop and talk. And if someone was new, the conversations would go on for hours until there was some agreement, some understanding. And the people who've been doing it for some time, it was inspiring to see how quickly they could work something through something. Sometimes literally someone just had to look and smile, and the other person, oh, I got it. Because they knew each other so well, they're having these conversations so well. So that was quite, and they called themselves a spiritual place, a spiritual practice. And I had no interest in spirituality when I came there. But because they associated this honesty with spirituality, I thought, oh, this maybe is more interesting than and then they had Zen Mind Beginner's Mind there, and I started reading it, and that made a big impact on me. So after about 4 months, I left, and I came out to San Francisco Zen Center to check it out. And that was really meaningful for me. And I immediately felt like this was something that I wanted to do. But I guess I was 20 still. And I felt, look, I have a few things to take care of before I can do that. And so I don't tell you the details, but then eventually I went back in 1976 to UC Davis to get a degree in agronomy because I got really interested in farming. And that summer of 77, I came back to Santa Cruz to work on back then it was called the Farm and Garden. Now I think it's called the Student Farm Garden or something. I don't know what the apprentice, I don't know what it's called now. Agroecology now. And any of you been there, worked there? See, Oren, what's Oren's last name? Oren Martin, and then Jim Nelson, was he there? Those are the two people when I was there. And I lived in a teepee, and I loved working in the gardens there. It was a wonderful summer. But then every Wednesday, I came down to the Santa Cruz Zen Center, where the founder of it, Chino, would talk, and that had a big impact on me to live in a teepee, live on the land, work the garden, and part of all that was coming down to sit zazen on Wednesdays with Kobun. And Kobun was kind of I don't know how to characterize him, but he was kind of a free spirit in a kind of wild way. And I didn't always understand him, but that wasn't the point. And then I also came down here to Badra Summer to some school auditorium over not so far from the campus, I think, where Baba Haridas would meet with his and there were all these hippies, and they divide the room into sides, men and women, and then they would sing Hindu devotional chants much of the evening. And they would rock out. It was so much fun, And then Baba Haridas would do his little thing on his chalkboard, and so that was kind of inspiring. And so the combination of that living on the land, being connected to these spiritual teachers and their practice, and here in Santa Cruz. And what maybe some of you don't know is that Santa Cruz has a long history with the Insight movement. Very early on, mid-70s, Sharon Salzberg taught retreats up in the mountains here. Joseph taught here. John Travis was up here practicing here. John Hall, who was a spirit rock teacher, also had a house in the Santa Cruz Mountains and had everyone over and did things. And Stephen Levine was here when he did a lot of his beginning work as teaching Buddhism. So it was a kind of a hotbed for insight practice that you all are kind of in the lineage of following in the footsteps of and continuing that. So then I went to 1978. So then that summer of around that, I don't know when it was, in the 70s, I went to Green Gulch for the first time, Green Gulch Zen Center. And I saw the Abbott's car in the parking lot. And I looked at that car, and something didn't seem right to me. First of all, it was an Audi. And for a poor hippie, this was over the top luxury. And then he also had a personalized license plate, and it said 000 Zen. And I looked at the 00 Zen, like 007. And I said, I looked at that, looked at the Audi, and I said to myself, I don't approve of this person's lifestyle, but I can learn Zen from him. And I don't know if that was, the wisest choice, but that's what I made. And so I went to Zen Center at some point to live there and practice there. And I learned a lot. It was really great for me. And finally, when there was a scandal with him, I wasn't surprised. So I wasn't one of those people who felt deeply betrayed because I kind of understood that there was something about him that I couldn't quite accept. And one of the important things about a number of things was very important for me about Zen practice that supported me in doing Vipassana practice, and really shaped it, and shaped also how we organize, how I teach Vipassana, how I conduct myself as a teacher, and also how we organize the IRC, the retreat center we have here in Santa Cruz. And one was that practicing with people was important. And that's one of the reasons I went to live at Zen Center, was to practice with people. And what I discovered was that I was playing all these social games, social, I was trying to manipulate, getting people to like me, getting people to see me the way I wanted to be seen. So I was kind of behaving in certain ways to have a certain effect on people. And with my friends, that seemed to be fine. We all were doing it probably. And but when I went to Zen Center, people didn't participate. People didn't pick up the cues and act accordingly. They became a mirror for me. And I thought, this is fantastic. To be able to see myself more clearly through other people. And that's why I went to Zen Center to practice. One of the reasons was I wanted that mirroring to be seen. And then in that time of living at Zen Center, I'm very confident would say that I couldn't have practiced as much as I did and have done over the years without the support of the community that I practiced with. And that was right from the beginning. When I went to UC Davis to get my agronomy degree, there was a small Zen group there. That small, I mean, sometimes I think there were 4 of us in the little bedroom of an apartment. We went Tuesday and Thursday nights and sat there. But I went, for a college student, it's kind of unusual, I suppose, in retrospect. I went every Tuesday and every Thursday evening. That's what I did. There was no question. There was never any challenge for it. I just did it. But in retrospect, that little community was very important for me. I wouldn't have done that on my own. And we did 2 sittings. We sat and walked and sat, and that was all we did. And that created a really important foundation for me of continuity. And then when I went to Zen Center, they were practicing in community. And in Japanese Zen, the idea of practicing in community is held in high value. It's considered extremely important that it's almost like practice doesn't exist without doing it together with others, meditating together in a community. And one of the reasons it's so important is because life is easy except for the people. And so, so there was lots to practice with. That was important. But also, I was inspired by the people who were more senior than me. I could see their compassion. And I was changed by the compassion of some of the people there that I received from them. And I'd never seen this kind of compassion and care. I saw people who seemed remarkably free, people who weren't playing social games, people who seemed to be very simple and content just to be alive, just to do their work, just to be walking. I remember once watching a Zen priest walking across the courtyard, and there was something about the freedom with which he walked, unconcerned about others, at ease with himself, like he was going somewhere clearly, but at the same time it didn't matter. He was just doing the walking. And I don't know how much I was projecting into him. I don't know what really was going on in his mind. But it made a huge difference. What I saw, what I read into him, oh, this is possible to be this way. And I had no idea that this was possible, this kind of freedom, simplicity, and lack of always being caught up in concerns and rushing ahead to the next thing. And so in so many ways, I learned from the other people around me. And I think that I wouldn't have practiced as long as I did or as deep as I did. And one of the reasons another reason I went to Zen Center, that was also a big learning for me, was that I didn't go to Zen Center to meditate more. That was like the byproduct. That was like, cool. I went to Zen Center because I've been in my meditation. I was starting to feel a kind of integrity. I called it integrity at the time. I don't think it was ethical integrity, but I think it was my way of saying back then, of saying I felt whole. I felt integrity because I felt like one or something. And I'd never felt that way in a regular way my life before that. And I as a college student there too, I meditated every day when I woke up and before I went to sleep. And in retrospect, I thought that was strange for a college student in his young 20s to do that. But I never thought about it. That's just what I did. And I started feeling this integrity that felt so good. And I told myself at some point, asked myself, why do I only feel it in meditation and not outside? The line between meditation and life is an arbitrary line. I should have this in my life as well. And so the quest then was how to bring what I was feeling or how I was being in meditation into my life. And that's when I decided maybe I'll go to Zen Center because I want to be in a place where that's supported. So I went there, we meditated more. And then at some point I just felt I was supposed to go to UC Berkeley at some point to graduate school in soil science. And about 2 weeks before I had a flash of something where I said, I'm not going to graduate school, I'm going to Tassajara. And so I went to the Zen monastery. But it was to that quest, how to have this integrity in the rest of my life. But Tassajara, you meditate even more. So it was kind of a nice coincidence that I had to meditate a lot. And so this integrity, this goodness that was there slowly kind of grew and developed. And as some of you have maybe heard me say that I didn't get enlightened through Zen practice, but I became compassionate. And that was also only understood after the fact. For a while there, when I was at Zen Center, I had so much suffering. I needed to have compassion. And so I was projecting it into the world. And I would see it in people, and I'd tell, that person's full of compassion. And they'd look at me like I was really weird. Really? That person. And then there was a statue at Zen Center that was abstract. And to me, it was just the embodiment of compassion. And later, I found out the title, the artist who made it, it was a flame of compassion. I don't know. I thought it was some abstract statue of Kuan Yin or something. But I started collecting photographs of Kuan Yin, Kandon, Avalokiteshvara, and copy, anything having to do with compassion, I was just drawn to. And I think it was my way of getting it for myself. I needed it so much. And so slowly something opened in my heart. It was very gradual. I didn't plan it. I didn't even know what was happening. I didn't recognize it. It was just, I was operating kind of on automatic. But slowly that's what happened. And it changed my life. Compassion then became the orienting principle of my life. And and that has been one of the great pleasures of my life, great joys, that this strong sense of compassion arose, that I decided that was going to be the basis, the organizing principle for how I was going to live my life. And that's when I decided to devote my life to Buddhism, to in some way support the world to practice Buddhism, or to somehow, because that was the best way I knew of how to get to the heart of human suffering. And so being able to practice in community, to be able to sit day after day after day, and allow this slow process of opening, this slow process of change, this slow process of melting my suffering, slow process of awakening of compassion. No one told me that this would happen this way. No one instructed me to make the work this way. This was a I didn't even see it happening. I didn't recognize it happening. It was in retrospect, I look back, wow, this has really changed my life dramatically from all this. And one of the disappointments for me in being at Zen Center was that because of how important honesty was at the farm in Tennessee, that inspired me to know, to tremendously. And I kind of expected that, and Buddhism people would be the same way, but they weren't. And it wasn't like they were liars or, dishonest people, but they were, Buddhists can often be conflict avoidant. Buddhists can often be kind of live with a big shadow side of anger, not supposed to be kind, right? So then you don't show your anger. And so there was all this kind of dysfunctional things that they didn't talk about. If there was conflict and tension in the community, they didn't know how to stop and talk and be honest about it. And so that was quite disappointing to me. But there, the same thing like with the abbot. I said, well, I can still learn Zen here. And I'll just, put up with this. And then, and it's okay. And it was okay for me. I mean, I feel like I developed a lot, grew a lot. So one of the important things that I learned at Zen Center was the freedom that comes from generosity, from giving freely. And I did not know anything about that. So that was kind of a little bit foreign idea to me. So that I remember back then Zen Center had a bakery called the Tassajara Bakery over on Cole Street near the hospital there, Parnassus. And so I was working there in 1979. And Jay Simino, who was a priest, was also the head of the bakery. And one day I was in the office of the bakery, and somehow I was sitting next to him or something at the desk, and he opened a letter from some kind of neighborhood association that was asking for a donation for some neighborhood cause. And he asked me, he showed it to me, he said, what should I do? I didn't know what to say. I'm like, what? What do you do? I don't know. And he said, I'm gonna send them $50. And I was like, why? The fact that I was so surprised me. I said, wow, he would do that? And so it's a small thing, but for me it was huge because it just opened the door for this idea of generosity and giving. I thought, wow, this is interesting. Why would someone do that? And so that was the beginning of me beginning to appreciate generosity and what it is. And then at Zen Center also, the way that I picked up the ethos of the place was more or less that the practice was offered freely, the teachings were offered freely, and there was no request for money. And I was given the opportunities to practice there and for a good number of years. And money was never really in the picture. And I got the sense that the teachers there, when they gave a talk, they weren't expecting money because it wasn't money wasn't part of the deal. It was just everything's offered freely. Everything's, a money-free society, economy within this large community of Zen Center. And that inspired me greatly. Inspired me to give myself over and don't give my time, my efforts to be supportive and helpful. And it just seemed like the most natural thing in the world, that's the way that the Dharma is taught. And so then when I did get involved with Vipassana practice in Thailand, it was the same thing there, that there was never any request for money. There was one monastery I was at in Thailand with Buddhadasa, where they asked for $1 a day. But that was mostly so they can buy soy milk for the Westerners. And so when I came back here and started to teach, Jack Cornfield invited me to the teacher training in 1989 or so, and got trained. It just seemed like the most natural thing in the world. I mean, I didn't have to think about it. There was no decision involved. That I was asked to teach, and I would teach without any thought or concern for money. And so how I ended up teaching in Palo Alto was there was a small sitting group there. And that small sitting group was run by a local Santa Cruz person, I think, very wonderful. Bob Stahl and I were both kind of following in the wake of this wonderful man, Rob Noodleman. What was his first name? Howard Noodleman. Anybody remember him? Howard Noodleman. And he so he started the mindfulness-based stress reduction at El Camino Hospital that he passed over to Bob Stahl. And he started the sitting group in Palo Alto that he handed over to me. And Bob Stahl and I didn't know each other for a long time, but we were like both doing this parallel Howard Noodleman kind of track. And he handed over to me because he had gotten cancer that he died from. And I was a brand new teacher. I'd maybe given 2 Dharma talks my whole life, and I didn't know what I was doing. And those were Zen. And pretty much most of my experience of Vipassana was in Asia. And suddenly I was asked to be a Western American Vipassana teacher in the Jack Cornfield, Joseph Goldstein lineage. I didn't know anything about what, this whole American thing. So it was a big study for me to kind of catch up to speed. And it was kind of fun because I had to kind of teach myself. And I say many, many times that everyone should be a Buddhist teacher because it's the best way to learn. And I learned so much because of it. And so I started teaching in 1990 there for the small group. And there was never any discussion about money. And I had no expectation of it. But they didn't have a basket in order to collect money for rent. And after teaching there for about 9 months, the person who took care of that money said, we have like $100 left extra right now, more than we need. What should we do? And someone said, let's give it to Gil. Great. And then 9 months later, I got another $100. And but I wasn't expecting it. There was no idea that was part of the deal, and that there was nothing. It was just really freely given, the teaching. But I also, because of my time in Zen Center, I thought it's really important that people have the opportunity to support the place they practice in. And so I wanted to give people a chance to be volunteers, and there was almost no need for it. But I thought it's so important. So I asked someone to be the president of the sitting group. There was 12 people, right? And her major responsibility as president was to have the key. They would open the door every Monday night in this little church. And then I asked we had all these flyers from Spirit Rock. We were kind of like an extension of Spirit Rock. Howard Noodleman was the president of the Spirit Rock board. And so we had all these flyers. And so it was easier for me to just put them in the trunk of my car. But I wanted other people to have a chance to volunteer. So I asked if someone else would keep the flyers and put them out every week. And so that principle of giving people the opportunities to volunteer and help was something that I kept doing. And it got to some point that I don't know when it was, in the late 90s, that I asked for volunteers, and I felt so sad because there were more people who wanted to volunteer than we had work for them to do. Because I saw it was so useful and important for people to participate, and it's almost like part of the practice is to share the practice, to open the practice, support other people in the practice. And then in about 1996, so I started in 1990 teaching. In 1996, this was my plan. I had a plan. I was going to school at Stanford, so I was getting a PhD in Buddhist studies, and I didn't want to live in the city, in a town, and my wife certainly didn't want to live in the city. I was afraid that if we stayed in the peninsula in the urban area, she would die. and so the plan was to build up IMC, the community, that sitting group, to be big enough so I could invite another teacher in so I could leave. No, that was the plan. And so it was growing and growing and growing. And at some point, I was so impressed by the sincerity, dedication of the people, the practitioners there, that I decided that I wasn't going to go. I would stay there and support them. But I thought, this is a big decision to make. And I said, I felt it's very important that someone here understands this. So I gathered some of the senior people, or I don't know how they were senior. They were just been a few years, but gathered some of the people together, and we had a potluck in someone's house, and to talk about our group. And I said, I want to tell you, I don't expect anything that you do anything at all. I don't but I need to let some of the community members know that I've made this decision. I don't want it to just be a private decision on my own. That I'm committed now, staying and supporting this group. And then they said, great, I guess. But then in the course of that evening, the conversation unfolded with the idea that we should go for get a nonprofit status and be prepared someday to get our own place. So that was quite a surprise to me that that's how it evolved. And then very quickly, I got a sense that how useful it would be to have our own place. By that time, we were meeting, I think we were meeting in 2, 3, or 5 different places, maybe 4 different places in any given week. And I didn't have any place to do practice discussions with people. So in the summer, I did it in the park in Palo Alto. In the winter, when it was cold and stuff, I did it in Cafe Verona. And it was a little bit odd because I'd be sitting there talking, having practice discussion, and people are crying and and talking about their life. And I'm just sitting there having my coffee and so we started fundraising, and that was very successful. A variety of ways. Susan was very much involved with that. Thank you. And then we bought the place in Redwood City. And one of the surprises for me is because we were 100% dana, 100% freely given, and that meant for us that we hardly talked about giving. It was just freely given. We did. Like I'd seen other places where people kept giving dana talks, and I felt they were counterproductive. I felt like they created the wrong atmosphere, the wrong understanding, the wrong kind of ethos for what generosity is. And so we never really talked about it much. And I got the sense that people were really inspired by that. And that's one of the reasons why many people said they appreciated IMC and wanted to support it. And lo and behold, out of that, we got the retreat center. The donations came for that as well, and building it, renovating it. So one of the big lessons for me in these years is how wonderful generosity is, and how wonderful karma it creates, and wonderful conditions it creates and supports. And it certainly was part of my growth. this ripening of me. It wasn't always easy to be Dandana. Like, am I going to have enough money to live on? And then I started having kids. Is this going to work? And how is this going to work? But every time I had some questions about it, I was committed. Part of the commitment was to always check myself carefully, always work with it and try to let go of any attachment I have, to work through any fear I had. And so I can really kind of keep coming from this place where it was as clean generosity as I could imagine happening. So that was a practice in itself to work with that, and it felt like a very important practice to do. And the goal was to have it, that whole freely given dhanas thing, be relaxed. And part of what helped it be relaxed was I never thought that the IMC had to survive. I thought to hang on to it like this has to survive at all costs. That creates the wrong conditions. And probably if we had been I always felt like if I was really had been responsible for IMC and really did everything I could as a responsible grown-up, we wouldn't have survived. It would have created a very different culture, a very different way. So I like to call what my leadership at IMC. Maybe have you heard this, Susan? Responsible irresponsibility. And just irresponsible enough that things will somehow manage themselves. And it's been a wonderful thing for me personally to live in that world. And I think it's been really good for many people in our community to participate in that. It inspires people a lot, and it's surprising how much generosity comes out of that community in all kinds of ways. It's much more than just money, work. Many people who offer so much of themselves to support the community, and time and effort. And one of the great delights for me is I come into IMC one day and see that something's been taken care of that I didn't know needed to be cared for. I said, wow, someone saw it and they just went and did it. And no one asked them, and they just saw it and they stepped forward to do it. And then part of this, there's a variety of ways also with this culture, Buddhist culture that we built up there, that it also provided a very interesting perspective to see or to understand the wider American culture we're in, that I wouldn't have understood otherwise. And so one of the things was to see how strong the tremendous momentum of commerciality, paying money is, and how much pressure and fear and desire there exists in our society around it. And there's a lot of pressure to want to charge to, and we have to do this, in order to survive, and we have to. And I just felt like it was this crowding in of the commercial culture, and so my job has been to hold that at bay, and my job has been to be real. I've kind of chosen to be very conservative around it, maybe more than I needed to do, but I felt like I needed to have a really strong line to really preserve this whole freely given thing and not have the commercial market kind of squeeze in somehow, because it's a slow process of it slowly growing. I've seen in other centers where they open the door a little bit, and then they take a step more, and then it becomes all expensive. And so it's been interesting to see those forces, those commercial forces in our society, and feel them kind of encroaching on us and having to somehow hold a line. And there's so many ways. So maybe I'll stop so you can ask questions. But so there's so many surprises being a Buddhist teacher, and it's been, I think every surprise is an opportunity for me to grow. And but one of the surprises, how as a Buddhist teacher in a somewhat large community, is I sit at the crossroads of society's tensions. And so people will come to me and say, I want X. Someone says, no, it has to be Y. And then, but they're diametrically opposed to each other. But both of them saying it has to be this way, and and they're angry if I don't do it. They expect me to do their thing, and then the next day someone says the opposite. That just be and so there's so many of these tensions in society. Some of them, some things people wanted, I share their values. Some of them I didn't, but it was just so fascinating to feel how so many things went through the teacher. And so being a teacher is not for the lighthearted. Well, I didn't tell you that before. And because of, it's a funny role to sit in. And, you look like you're just up here being relaxed and blabbing and stuff. But the amount of projection, the amount of needs, the expectations, the wants people have, and it's fascinating. It's a real learning. It's learning about people, about society, social dynamics, and learning about myself and how I sit with that. So it's so I've been doing this. So I've been doing Buddhism now for 50 years, and I feel like it just keeps getting better. And I feel like I'm just more and more delighted. And I feel a growing delight in people. I think it's kind of known that as you get deeper into practice yourself, people start seeing more beautiful. And lately I've been thinking, I see people and I feel like I'm like looking at natural wonder. Just like wow, that's like looking at Half Dome or something, or it's so beautiful. And that I had no idea that something that was possible or would happen, but it feels like that's just kind of growing through this practice and this life of the Dharma. It's just be so appreciative of people and delighted in them. And one of the surprising lessons for me, and I don't know how much it has to do with being a Buddhist teacher, but now, I'm surprised to have become a senior teacher. I mean, that's like really surprising. And I remember being so shocked when because I was still felt like I was a little kid in the Dharma, and people were starting to treat me like I was a senior teacher. I was like, what's going on? I'd go like that. And but now, that doesn't make sense to try to stop it when I'm 72. And so I don't know if it has to do with my age or what it has to do with, but one of the other thing that's really a surprise for me that my role as a teacher is not to give meditation instructions, not to give Buddhist teaching, but to affirm people, to appreciate people. And it isn't like something I have to work at doing. I kind of naturally just find myself doing it more and more and more. And it just seems like a wonderful privilege in this role to be able to look at people and delight in them and hear what their practice is and say, you're doing great. And your way is great. You have your own way to do it and you can trust yourself. And it's such a nice role to be in that, anyway, it's getting better and better. So that was my attempt to say something. And, but maybe you can help. If you have questions, comments, yes, please. Maybe. Well, we never had exactly that conversation. But the I think now I believe she's only now beginning to accept the idea that maybe we're staying. And she likes it there now. She has lots of friends. She has activities she loves doing. So it's, but, and then we had kids, and that was preoccupying. And so, and then, so I don't know, no, so and then because of her sake, to help her feel happier, make it work for her, we did buy a house at some point in Redwood City. It's a very small house. It's 900 square feet. It was sold as a cottage, but it's 8,000 square foot lot. And so that's why she could garden. She could spend time in the garden at work. So that made a huge difference for her. Yeah, please.
Any other questions?
The other thing that I find surprising or wonderful is having been one place for so long. I grew up moving a lot. I think I went to 12 schools in 12 years of growing, or not 12 schools, but I changed school 12 times. Sometimes I was back to the same school. So a lot of moving, living in different countries, and and it was fine for me. Some of it I really enjoyed, and but now I've kind of been living in the Bay Area for 50 years too, on and off a little bit, but it's I delight in the rich connections I have. All these centers and people and friends, and it just feels so socially rich in a way that I didn't have when I was growing up, when it was kind of socially poor. So anyway, that's been a surprise.
I want to thank you for the 7 a.m. weekday Sangha. I just feel like it's been just dripping nectar and soaking it in. And I just wondered if you wanted to say anything about beginning that gift to everybody in the pandemic.
Well, there were people who wanted us to be able to do things online. And actually, the first people who tried to help support that happen came from San Francisco Zen Center, because they were trying to convince Zen Center to do it, but they were kind of conservative. So he just said, "Well, I'll go ask Gil if he wants to do it." And so when the pandemics began and everything shut down, all the technology was ready to go. And so it just seemed like, okay, let's just switch over. And so we started it, and it didn't stop. And I enjoy it a lot. It turns out it works really well for me, these 15-minute talks. And somehow, it'd probably be boring if it was a 45-minute talk the same way. But the 15 minutes I get away with. And to have a theme for the week, I find really, really nice, and I enjoy exploring and thinking about it. And it's not unusual for me to discover that somehow I know more than I knew. It's kind of a process of discovery, even doing it sometimes.
Start it? Yeah, I could. No, the online people need to be able to hear you.
Gil, I'm curious about your interest in the peace chaplaincy work and what drew you to that, and especially given the condition of the world today, and how do we respond compassionately to what's going on?
Yeah, I tried hard not to start it because, my age, to start something new, and just all kinds of reasons. But I couldn't because of the conditions of the world. But I think also it's kind of again, this thing about 50 years. I think that there's something about my life, how it unfolded, that one way of understanding is everything I did before prepared me for this. It kind of makes sense. This was an interest of mine when I was 18 and 19. I was at the draft age for the Vietnam War. So this whole topic of being drafted and going to fight in the war was a huge topic, and the whole counterculture of the time, and the college students being killed at Kent State. it was a challenging time. And I also I was born in Europe, and I grew up very much with World War II and the shadows of World War II, and talking to people who survived war, soldiers, people in concentration camps. There's the whole war thing is a huge piece of my consciousness in a sense. And so I had a strong interest in nonviolence, strong interest in civil disobedience, and one of my first interests in Buddhism that was more intellectual than it was practical was I was a committed pacifist. But being a pacifist didn't mean to be passive. It meant that if I was going to follow through on my beliefs, I'd have to put my life on the line. I had to put myself in situations of civil disobedience where I could die. And I was afraid of dying. And I felt like it doesn't feel good to have this fear that interferes with my values. And so I was looking around for some kind of way of resolving or dealing with that fear. And so the intuition I had is that Buddhism had the answer. And so that was my first interest in Buddhism, but it wasn't an interest that was enough to get me to practice. Anyway, so it's a long answer that it's been a kind of interest of mine for a long time, and it feels like some kind of culmination or conclusion of a momentum that's been going on for 50 years.
I really appreciate how you're in your 7 o'clock morning sits, how you have allowed other teachers to come in, and you're giving them a chance to grow and to expand, and I love that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's really nice to hear, and that gives me a chance maybe to say one of the things I wanted to share here with this group. And that, again, some of the things I learned in these 50 years is another surprise is that, they say I'm a senior teacher. But at some point, my role, the opportunity I have is to support other teachers. That in my position of my position, my access to resources, my understanding, my relationships I had, that one of the things I can do now is to support others to start teaching. So I can train teachers that other people can't maybe easily do. I can give them opportunities to teach. I feel like part of my role now is to figure out how to create more opportunities for the newer teachers to teach and to expand that. And it's not about my teaching so much anymore as it is to make room for the next generations to do it. So it's kind of happening naturally there because I can't be there all the time. And we have these wonderful people to do. But this is part of my task now in the years to come is how to spread it and expand it out, and not to keep all the opportunities for myself, but to spread it out and offer it and develop and more people to do them and encourage them and empower them and inspire them to be wonderful teachers.
My experience of having those people come in is just this deep hammock of support of just how held, at least I can speak for myself, but I feel like the whole Sangha has felt held by the breadth and the depth of all of those people. And that it isn't just you, it's the Dharma, and it's just such a deep holding.
Fantastic. I love hearing this.
Do we have any questions online?
But is it Sam?
Okay, one moment. Just and if you want to put your digital hand up online, we'll get to you in just a moment. Bill will be with you in just a moment after this person.
Hi, Gil. I was just curious if after 50 years you had any reflections on being a parent as a Buddhist teacher and Dharma teacher.
Yeah. Well, my answer will be pretty particular to me and my circumstances and my personality and things. But I loved monastic life. Sometimes I thought monastic life that I lived was the perfect lifestyle. I mean, so I was like tailor-made for it. I was just where I was happy doing it and I could like go into it. So that was nice. In contrast, parenting was hard for me. And I remember after my first son was born, I'd be tired a lot and I didn't have time to prepare for talks. And I was teaching in Palo Alto and I thought my talks were getting worse and worse. People loved them more and more. So I'm a much better person because I was a parent. It was challenging for me. I suffered a fair amount. It was stressful. There was a lot of things to navigate and negotiate. We had the first child was back then, I don't know what they call him now, but back then he was called a high-spirited child. And so parenting for me, so I loved it, being a parent. It was really good for me. I think it was really important for me as a teacher to have been a parent. I feel like I can understand people I talk with and meet much better now than when I came out of the monastic time, where I thought simplistically it's all about just letting go, isn't it? And also I was very touched because going along and meeting all these other kids, my kids' age, their play friends and other kids in their schools, and just seeing the diversity of children. I was just so inspired by children and how diverse they are, how unique they were, and the challenges they had. And it was just such an important window into human beings that was more than just having my own kids, just seeing the range of them.
We have a question online. Bill, go ahead.
Hi, Gil. Thank you. I'm right here. I'm not up there. Bill, you said a couple things tonight. First of all, the 7 a.m. is my daily practice, and I've for a little over 2 years now every morning. And there's just an incredible, rich amount of material from all the teachers that show up, and so I really appreciate, of course, learning from you, but also from everybody else who's offering their experience and their time and their wisdom there. And then tonight you said a couple things that really kind of resonated as well. Like, it's not a practice of hurrying to get anywhere. For me, that was that still is a challenge of mine, is, I want enlightenment now, kind of thing. And it's genuinely like noticeable in my practice that I can take what I'm learning from you and from Dawn and other teachers that help me just to sit back and kind of sit back on the horse and just let it walk at its own pace and don't be in a hurry. So that's a really neat part of this. It's a maturing process, and so I really like it. And then also the question you offered in the meditation is, what are you going to do right now to help you ripen in the future, right? And as a fruit, I was just kind of picturing, well, I'm going to hold myself with open hands, gently, but also have a firm foundation so I don't fall off the tree too early and get stepped on. So there's just a lot of and there's not really a question there. It's more just an appreciation and a thank you for, coming to Santa Cruz tonight and just giving this talk. And there's only other thing I wanted to say is if my dad and I, when I was 12 and you're hitchhiking and he passed you on the road, I'm sorry that we didn't pick you up. But
Maybe he picked me up.
Well, we had 7 kids, so I don't think there would have been room.
No.
But anyway, thank you. That's all I kind of wanted to share.
Thank you. And maybe it doesn't come directly from what you say, but I'm inspired by what you said. It's not just individuals who mature, it's communities as well. And that's what I've seen at IMC and seen around me. It's been really inspiring for me to see the community mature and as a whole. And I see that as the community has been maturing, new people coming in mature faster. There's a context for it. There's an understanding. It's by osmosis. There's models. There's all kinds of things. And I've been watching it steadily. So I would say that, yeah, I don't know if it's exactly when we started in Redwood City in 2002, January 2002, we started there. But around that time, there was, I think I would look back and say that was the beginning of watching a slow, steady maturity over the last 25 years in the community. And that's not a small thing. And sometimes I see that people are very individualistically oriented around their practice and that they don't even realize how much they're picking up from the community and being influenced by the community. And I'm quite inspired by how many people are maturing a lot and more and how, in a way that was unimaginable for me 50 years ago or 40 years ago. And some of the examples of that is all these people who are teaching 7 a.m. with me. I mean, I think all of them I knew when they were new students, or I knew when they were kind of young students in the Dharma. And to see them grow and develop and mature has been such a wonderful thing. And so I'd like to do then this is supposed to be a fundraiser. And since I don't want to talk about for IMC or for myself, I never want to talk about money, but it allows me to enthusiastically promote fundraising for Inside Santa Cruz, unapologetically. And one of the ways to talk about that is that having a place like your own center, I've seen it for ourselves, is really helpful and supportive for people to mature as practitioners. Because there's something about the gathering in a place that's familiar, that's dedicated to this kind of thing, that is where the community can meet each other over and over again. There's something about that's the yeast, or that's the sugar that allows kind of the Dharma to kind of grow and develop. It's such an important thing. So I think real estate is good. And that's been the true down through the ages. There's temples, there's monasteries, and that they've always been there. That's the hub for where this Dharma flows out of. So I think having Inside Santa Cruz is phenomenal, that you have your own place like this. And the other thing that is phenomenal is having a Dharma teacher. I mean, it's my experience and my belief that having that a lot of this happens one way or the other around the hub of a Dharma teacher. It's almost easier to have just one person. Once you have like a teaching team, something gets dispersed. But you have the vision, the culture, the ethos of one person. You don't have to see the person as your teacher, but you don't have to be, teach a student with a person. But you are kind of sharing the benefits of something being organized with one person who has a vision, one person who's caring consistently, who has a steadiness. And that's what I learned from San Francisco Zen Center as well, practicing there. So that when I came to be part of the sitting group in 1990, take it over from Howard Middleman, it was kind of second nature for me that my job was to be consistent. Just whenever I could, I showed up. And that just my consistency was stabilizing, was supportive, was kind of like created the conditions for the community to come together. And even if people didn't come, it made a difference to know that I was there, And now I don't have to be there as much because now there's much more than just me that's the center. But for you all, I think to support Inside Santa Cruz, to support Inside Santa Cruz, that can support Don, to support some of the other teachers who come here, I think is not just good for Inside Santa Cruz, it's good for all of you as individual practitioners, it's good for the community, and it's also good for the wider community. Inside Santa Cruz is now a citizen of Santa Cruz. It's it's a church of Santa Cruz, if you will, and so as it grows and develops and is well supported, it allows it to spill over and participate in some wonderful way with a wider community too, which I think is a wonderful opportunity for these places. So Dawn's been doing a great job. I track her down here. She talks to me regularly, and I'm very enthusiastic about Inside Santa Cruz. I'm friends with Mary Orr, who helped start it, Bob Stahl, and there's such a wonderful, rich momentum here that it's really, really wonderful and inspiring to support. So, please consider supporting it and making it successful and having it go for 50 years. So this is.
Thank you so much, Gil. And when you're ready, we'll transition to informal social time. I don't know if you want to dedicate merit or not.
Oh no, someone here should do it.
Oh.
Someone who's been a chaplain.
There's a lot of them in this room.
Yeah. Who wants to do it? It's your. Yes, with the mic.
Yeah, I can come. Yes, with the mic.
So may the goodness and the sweetness of practicing together and caring for our institution and supporting it, may all of that be gathered up and given away so that all beings may come to an end of suffering, not one left behind.
Fantastic. You see, I gave it away. I didn't want to do it. I let someone else do it. Look what we got. It was much better than I could have done it. Thank you. Very nice. So thank you for coming and letting me talk. And I hope that it was nice for you. But I do hope you support Inside Santa Cruz. It's really worth it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gil.